Geez, it says 6:59. I'm going to just hang on for a minute. Want to stay true to our pledge to start at 7. All right, it's 7. Hello and welcome to our 4th panel session, our final one of the 2021 Washington Writers Conference. I'm David O. Stewart and will be serving as moderator for this session, which is Selling the Darn Book. This session is being recorded. And before I introduce the panelists, I'm going to go over the same reminders you've been hearing at the other 3 sessions. But if your short-term memory is like mine, you need this. We ask that you remain muted during the panel. If you have questions, and we'd love you to have questions, please type them into the chat session. I'll pull from them, and we will have the last 30 minutes of tonight's session will be devoted. We'll do 60 minutes with the panelists, and then the last 30 minutes will be devoted to your questions. So please send them in. All attendees' pitch schedules, and I know these are precious pieces of information, were mailed out last night and this morning. They may have come from an unfamiliar email address, so if you don't have it, please check in your spam file folder just to see if it might be there. If you have questions, there will be an agent liaison email address in the chat session tonight, so you'll be able to copy that out for your own reference going on. This panel addresses the constant problem that it doesn't matter how you get published. Once you have a book, you really want people to buy it and read it. And one of the big changes over the last 20 years in publishing has been that authors are expected to do more and more. It doesn't matter who your publisher is. They have discovered that they can force us to do a lot of the work for them. And our leverage is pretty close to zero unless we sell a lot of books. So we have to do a lot more than just show up at scheduled events and be interesting. And tonight we have 2 successful authors who will talk about their experiences navigating this landscape, and an expert in advising authors, a whole range of authors. We have 1 novelist and 1 nonfiction writer. Just to introduce them quickly, Andrea Penrose, please wave at the team. Publishes historical fiction. She also, just to keep us confused, has books out under the names Andrea Pickens and Kara Elliott as well. She's won 2 Daphne du Maurier Awards for historical mystery and 2 Golden Leaf Awards. Dan de Vise, who should be waving at us from somewhere.
Hey, David.
There you are. Thank you. Is a former journalist who shared a Pulitzer Prize in 2001 while writing for the Washington Post. He has published 3 books, including a profile of champion cyclist Greg LeMond, and he has a forthcoming biography of blues legend B.B. King. That's much better research than reading old stuff like I do. Fauzia Burke operates an online book publicity firm and platform for building author websites. She also advises authors on book marketing and publicity through her firm, FSB Associates. She works with many authors whose names you know and has written her own book, of course, Online Marketing for Busy Authors, which I'm sure she sells very effectively. The model tonight is going to be, I hope, structured to be especially helpful by going through the same sequence with each subject. I'm going to raise a subject, a method of marketing, and ask each Andrea and Dan to address how they do it, whether they do it. Maybe they think it's stupid and they don't do it, and their experience with it, and then ask Fauzia to talk about good ways and not so good ways to use that particular method of marketing. So I'm going to start with the bête noire of the modern author, which is social media, which seems to be something that is always, at the edge of your consciousness, usually in an annoying way. So my questions are, which ones do you use? If you use them, how often do you try to post? And what kind of messages do you try to put out? Are they cat pictures, or are you doing promotional stuff, or a mix? Andrea?
Okay. I do probably all of them with varying degrees of frequency. I've become a big fan of Instagram simply because I have an art background and I enjoy taking photographs. That's probably the most personal of the social media. I have sort of a thing where I call it from the daily plotting walk, and I do kind of just fun pictures that capture my eye. It might be a close-up of nature. It might be something funny happening. And then I intersperse, some book promo in there. But it's really how I use it is to try and become a little interact with readers or people who like my books as a person, someone who's actually walking around, talking, seeing things other than just sitting at my writing desk. I dislike Facebook and I really dislike Twitter, but I do some perfunctory things there. We'll get into, I'm in a group blog, but I think you want to talk about blogging somewhere else, because that's really where the heart of my promo goes. But I do the Facebook, a mix again of some of book news, of if I see an interesting article on libraries or book related things, I try and keep that very, have an authory feel to it. And Twitter, I basically just repeat our group blog tweets. So I'm an introvert. I find it very hard to follow conversations on Twitter. So I just don't force myself to do it.
Okay. And Dan?
Yeah, I have a few thousand Twitter followers and several hundred Facebook friends. The friends on Facebook are people I actually know. The followers on Twitter, who knows? And most of my the stuff I put out on those platforms, I would say, yields negligible results. The one exception is this: there are groups on Facebook, and so for my Andy and Don book, which is a dual biography of Andy Griffith and Don Knotts, only after it had been in circulation for a while, I realized there were a couple of massive Facebook groups of fans of the show and of the guys. And so today, this very day, I posted something on a huge Don Knotts fan, club on Facebook. And I posted the same thing on a huge Andy Griffith show club. I would say the two have combined 30,000, 40,000 members, every single one of whom is interested in this. And what it was a link to an article that was a senior critic from TV Guide saying that Andy and Don are the greatest comedy duo in television history. So it's perfect. And that's the only thing that the only place on social media where I get a real impact. And in the past, I've done things like just my own giveaways where I say, I'll give this book, which is autographed, to the person who tells me the names of the 5 episodes Ernest T. Bass was in. And, I'm doing it myself, and I get hundreds of responses, and I'm positive people are buying the book out of that. And then, so for the book after that, which is about Greg LeMond, the great Tour de France guy, likewise, there are some enormous Facebook groups. There's one that, steel bicycle aficionados. There's one for cyclists over 50, cyclists over 60. And then there's much more narrowly, there's a Greg LeMond fan club on Facebook with several hundred members. And there too, I've given books away, I've interacted with them, and those sorts of posts yield huge dividends. So I would recommend that very highly.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, Fauzia.
So hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you. I'm coming from Southern California, so the power of Zoom, that I can be here with you, even though I'm across the country. Social media, man, it's a tough one because there are very few authors who really like it. So why do we do it, right? What's the point that we're torturing all of you authors into doing this? And the reason is because it's a way to connect with authors and readers in a way that we don't really have any other way to do it. And we never did. So social media opened us up to be able to connect with readers and engage with them. And so that's why it's important. It is not a sales channel. So anyone who's thinking, actually, I've had people say this to me, I've been on Twitter all week and my Amazon ranking hasn't changed. So that is so not going to happen at all. People are not going to start buying your book just because you showed up on social media. So I think one thing Andrea said that's really important, which is she enjoys Instagram. I think that's a really key important thing for authors to recognize. You can't be all things to all people. And so to try to be on platforms where you're not happy, it shows, like it's not working. So it's better to just spend time on one or two platforms that you actually enjoy and have the same readers. So Instagram is perfect for Andrea because that's where her audience is, right? That's a good audience for her. The demographic for Instagram is generally women and between the ages of 30 to 60. So that's a good demographic, and she likes graphics and she likes art. Perfect. Do that. You don't have to worry about doing anything else. And I also really love what Dan said, which is that he's not using social media as sort of like a catch-all for everything, hoping someone somewhere out there will like his books. He's actually doing the research to find the groups that are related to his book's topic. Of course, that works with nonfiction more than not fiction, but I think that niche marketing, that niche idea is really what digital marketing is all about. The fact that we can target our audiences. Mm-hmm. So on my website, there's a blog, and I actually put down the demographics for each of the different social networks. So if authors are interested, they can actually look at where their audience is, and then they can spend time in those places rather than trying to be everywhere. So that's really important. I think enjoying yourself is really important. So if you really don't like a platform, I hate Facebook too, Andrea, I'm with you on that. And as a digital marketer, I can't actually get out of it. So I'm like trapped. Right. But I love Twitter, and that's my main platform of choice. But again, it doesn't matter. It really matters where you're happy and where you enjoy being. So I think if the authors would stop thinking about it as a, as a mission that somehow there's something that someone, I hear this so often from authors who think there's just one little turnkey that if they did, social media would start delivering, sales to of their books. But it really isn't that. It's really a place where people connect with you. It's this platform where you can create likability, which is, I know, insane thing to think about for authors or for any human, that you have to create it, but it is a way to connect with people. So I think if they think of it that way, it's a lot less overwhelming and a lot less intimidating to do that. The third thing I would say is that just because you don't have 100,000 people does not mean your social media plan is not working. I have worked with people who have hundreds of thousands of people following them, and it makes bupkis difference on their sales. It is not a sales channel. So enjoy the people you have relationships with the people you already have, and that will build it. Don't worry about paying for fake followers. That doesn't really work. The most important element of social media is actually listening and engaging. So I'll say that, I know we have so much to cover, but I can probably talk about each of these for an hour, so I will pace myself. And I'll answer any questions at the end. I'm so glad we have lots of time to talk about that.
Okay, well, another tool which has become, this one is mandatory, I think now, is to have your own author website. So
Yeah.
Dan, what do you have on your author website? How often do you update it? And what has your experience been with it?
Yeah, my website was designed by an 8th grader. And the previous version was designed by a 6th grader, the same person, my daughter. And I'm actually shopping right now for somebody to do a new version of it, for which I'll probably spend some actual coin. I've talked to David and several fellow book people over the last couple of weeks about this. I get the sense that the main point of it is, give people a way so that they can click and buy your book. Make sure that there's something on there that says who you are and kind of what your background is. You never know when you're going to impress somebody with something. Elvin Bishop, the great blues guitar icon, read my bio and found out that I had done some articles that had gotten some guys released from prison. And that really moved him. And that's why he's doing a blurb for me now. So you never know who's going to see what on your website and kind of dig it. And then the other thing is just your email. I've probably 100 people, 200 people have reached out to me because my email address is on my site. I'd like to think that having a fancier website makes people take you more seriously, but I don't know because I don't have one. We'll see, check back with me in a couple of years because I've got a guy lined up who I think might do a really beautiful website, probably better than I deserve. But I guess, me personally, if I'm looking at other people's websites, if it's really, really old, then you kind of think the person might not be writing books anymore, and that's probably bad. So I guess it is good to keep it kind of current. And in my case, because I did all this journalism, I have some of that on there so people can see what I was doing before I was writing books. So I don't think it's hugely important. And I talked to 8 or 10, people who write for a living about this, and half of them think the website, that it's a waste to spend any money on it at all. And half of them think the opposite, for what that's worth.
Andrea?
Yeah, I think the website's pretty important. I mean, I first of all, I enjoyed, for a fiction writer, I find it really fun. I do historical mysteries, and I use a lot of early science from Regency era as weaving into the plots. So I have a section called diversions, and I put up a lot of research and, again, pictures, because I love it. One of my protagonists is a satirical cartoonist, and they were sort of the Trevor Noahs of their day in early in Regency England, which is Jane Austen's era. So I have a whole portfolio of satirical prints, so people can actually see them. They're amazingly detailed and colorful and funny and scathing, and I do things like that. And my current book has weaves in the early computer, which Charles Babbage was working on in the Regency. So I have a whole, I explain the history of that and have some background on who he is. So I think that's fun for a reader. And then I always have a section on my books, and there's an excerpt so someone can read the first chapter, and then obviously links to the different platforms where you can buy it. So I think I like to think I give some entertainment, but I also have the core of, if you want to take a read of a chapter, and if you want to just press the button, go buy the book. And of course have a bio. So I think if somebody happens to pick your book up at a bookstore or leaf through it or wants to know more about you, I think it is important to have an engaging website there. And, I try and keep it fairly fresh. I don't feel you have to change it every week for an author like me, but when I have a new book coming out or an appearance, I'll put that on the homepage, and but and I keep adding the research things. So that's what I do.
Do you use it to have people approach you about events and invite that sort of thing?
I have an email contact. I like Dan, but I do it that goes straight to a Gmail account that's just for my author
Right.
email, so that all the mail that goes there, when I check it, it's all, I know it's coming from the website. So.
Fauzia, you're up.
I am, yes, hello. So I think the website is pretty much central to all of your marketing. I think it is absolutely essential to have one. It is not necessary to spend thousands of dollars on it. I don't think it's necessary for you to spend a lot of money or spend money monthly on SEO people. There's lots of things you don't need in a website, but you absolutely have to have a home base for which all of your activities sort of comes together. So on your social media, you can post a link back to your website. That's really a central piece of the work you do on social media is, yes, you've got to entertain people and keep them involved and engaged, but ultimately you want them back to your website, and you want to have them come back to your website so they can sign up for your mailing list. Your mailing list is and I know we're going to talk about that in a minute, but your mailing list is your central, most important asset to your writing career. I cannot stress that enough. That a person is more likely to buy your book from your mailing list, from your email newsletter, than they are on social media. And I know social media is the sexy topic. We all get talked about it a lot, but it's really the workhorse of your marketing is going to be your mailing list. Yeah. But your website, not only do I think it's important, one of the amazing things about my career is that my company launched the first author website ever in 1997, which was for Sue Grafton. Wow. And it was quite the privilege of my career to start a company and have the #1 New York Times bestselling author's website. So I have believed in websites and the importance of websites, and I clearly have talked people into it since the beginning of websites. The thing is, you've got to come up with a couple of things. One is you need to have an idea of what the purpose is of your website, because it's not just to sell. I think Andrea has a really good idea of like creating new content and having information on there. So I think that's really key. You also want to have, if you want Google to keep sending you information, you've got to keep that website updated, because Google is not sending people to your website if it's not an updated website. So it's important for you to know your purpose. There's also a lot of do-it-yourself platforms. Clearly, Dan's daughter has figured them out and has been building websites in 6th grade, which is amazing. Good college essay for sure. And so there are a lot of do-it-yourself platforms, and I would really love it if you guys explored some of those, because I've been building websites, so I have people who did that. We were building websites on WordPress for a long time. We've built a lot of websites, authors, publishers, but you don't need a programmer and a designer anymore. There are lots of platforms, there's Squarespace and Wix. My own company launched a platform called PubSite, which is a do-it-yourself platform just for authors. So the problem with Wix and Squarespace and all of those is that they're really made for our entrepreneurs. So restaurants, event planners, photographers, they're not really made for books, and book people have very specific needs. And so what we did was we actually created a platform that's just for books, and I think it's really a good website, a good option. And really, you get 14 days free, so you can set it up if you want, and then it's only $20 a month. Before we did PubSite, we literally would build websites for authors for between $4,000 to $8,000. So it's a huge shift. And one of the problems with having those websites, once you spend that kind of money on a website, you don't want to touch it, right? You don't want to break it. You don't want to do anything with it. You don't want to mess with it. But do-it-yourself platforms allow you to actually have a little bit of a life in your website. So it reflects back the work you're doing. If you're frustrated, write a blog about your writer's blog. If you're on tour, make sure it's on your website. A lot of different ideas that you are playing with as creative people can be housed and can live on your website. The other thing you want to do is have a website that scales with you. So a lot of websites that are statically designed, it's very hard to add a new book without having to redesign the whole site. So you want to look for a platform that lets you go from 0 book to 10 books to 12 books without having to redesign your website. That's really important. We have Tom Clancy's website on our platform, and Robin Cook's, like hundreds of books, right? Lots and lots of books on their platform. We're not redesigning the site with every one. So think of it that way too. The other thing I would really appreciate, I would really want to impart to authors is that you are the curators of the content that you are creating, and books are part of that. But don't throw everything on your website, especially not on your homepage. If you have a website, make sure it's well organized, because the more content you put on your homepage, the more confused you are making people who are coming to your website. People will give you about 20 seconds when they're coming to your website. And if you decide you're going to let them choose whatever they like on your homepage, right? All your blogs, all your books, everything is on the homepage. You are not really thinking of yourself as a curator. And so it's your job to curate the information that is in your website on your homepage. So you're inviting people and you have a way to send them doing something. So like good call to action, all of those kinds of things are really important. And again, you do need to keep it updated, because you will literally lose traffic from Google if your site is not updated on a regular basis. So one of those, think about your website as a working document and not a brochure. A lot of us, especially in publishing, have been thinking about websites like a brochure. You throw it up there, you have your information on the book, people can go on it. I've seen people make mistakes on their homepage, and when I call it, tell them about it and say, oh, that's on your homepage. And they'll literally tell me, oh, right, I forgot, I never go to my website. So yeah, I think that's not good. So that's something to kind of keep in mind, is that you want to make sure that you're keeping it updated, that you are curating the information, that you try your hand at a do-it-yourself platform, because that'll give you a lot of, some of my authors have said that having control over their own website has been so empowering for them, because they can experiment, they can change things around. I change the design of my site every 3 months. And I can only do that because I use PubSite. On WordPress, my designers designed the site, and then I would come up with like, wait a second, can we do this? Because I'm an idea person. And I literally I could hear the eye rolls, because they knew what that meant. They had to redesign the site. They would have to reprogram the header. They'd have to redo the menu. And so I would be like, all right, it's not that big a deal. But on PubSite, I can just make changes anytime I want, right? I change the menu, I change the colors, I move the sections up and down. So I think it's a really great platform, but you can choose any of them. There's so many now. You can build a website on, Google is doing websites, GoDaddy is doing websites. God, I was printing some postcards on Vistaprint. There was a website option there. There are going to be more options for websites than you can imagine, but pick one that you enjoy using, that you feel comfortable using, and just have a little play, have fun with it. Because I think if you do it yourself, or you can keep it updated yourself, you will enjoy it more, and you'll keep it more part of your marketing.
Well, let's go on to where Fauzia was pointing us to, which is the question of newsletters and email lists. Andrea, you mentioned you have well, for me, it was an unusual approach to this, which I find really sort of cool. Can you talk about that?
On
Newsletters and email contact.
Well, no, I do pretty much normal newsletters. I put out, I try not to inundate people. It's if I do 4 or 5 a year, that's it's mostly when I have an upcoming book, or I have a special sale going on, like a BookBub special. But I found some very good ways to build mailing lists through because I write in basically a genre fiction, there are a number of places you can go. I use book sweeps that will group you. You know, they'll do a promotion, in a sense of a raffle. You enter to get a chance to win a set of 20 books and an e-reader, and all of the authors who participate, all you have to do is give one, maybe two free books, and everyone who enters, and there are usually lots and lots of entries because it's obviously free to enter, they have an option to receive sign up for the newsletter of every author in the group, and most people sign up. So I do a promotion, and you know, I'll get over 1,000 names for my email list, and they actually are readers. They're book people because they've entered to win a book, and I find I've built a really pretty hefty newsletter list. And the open rate is very good on it. So I found that to be a really, really good thing. And it's not expensive, the group ones to do. So if you're a fiction writer, I find that that's something really, if you're trying to build your list, boy, you get a pop right away. And I really highly recommend it.
I meant to be asking you about the group newsletter.
Oh, yeah, well, the group too. I mean, I didn't know whether you want me to talk about that under blog, because really my main promo thing is I'm in a writer's blog with there's 7 of us, and some very, you know, New York Times best-selling authors, and we do as well as our each of us have our own a personal email list, but we do one as a group too, and we do that we do monthly, because there's 7 of us, and there's always something we can talk about our books, and we always make sure 2 or 3 of us just throw in some fun thing. We live all around the world. So someone's in Australia, someone's in England. So they'll talk about, you know, a trip they've taken, or hear shrimp on the Barbies or something. We do goofy things in it too. And people seem to like that. I mean, we have a personality. We've come to be very good friends too. So we interact well with each other. And so that—
How did you find each other?
Through writers' conferences, really. We've bumped into each other. We write in similar genres, and the blog has been around for 15 years, which is amazing in terms of social media. And I was not one of the original, I think there were 5 of them who started. So I was asked to join when someone decided they just had enough of blogging, and we've stayed pretty stable. But it is what I call the lifeboat approach, where as an author, I mean, we can I've got 7 times an amplifying for anything I do. When I put something up on Twitter or Facebook, all of us share each other's posts. So that it's just a great strategy. If you have another writer pal, or if there are 2 or 3 of you who are in the same genre, think about pooling your, you know, you can do a group blog, and it's so much less work than trying to do it every, you know, 3 times a week yourself. You'd burn out, but we can do it 3 times a week because we have 7 of us. And it's also great moral support. You know, I can be writing at midnight sometimes thinking, oh my God, this is the worst book, you know, and I'll see we have a group email, and someone will say, oh, are you up? You know, gee, and we'll start chatting, you know, and the others will get up in the morning and say, you guys were having way too much fun last night. So it's a good, it works in a lot of ways. It can keep your spirits up when you're feeling a little down, and you really can share the camaraderie of what you're doing, and amplify your reach.
So Dan, have you ventured into this world?
Yeah, you know, I've been thinking about it more and more since since we gathered a few days ago to talk about this, I don't have one of those things where when you visit my website, it asks as you're leaving if you want to
Sign up.
receive occasional updates.
Yeah.
And I guess I just wasn't sure if I was that kind of person, that kind of writer who wanted to do that, but a lot of people do, and it seems pretty unobtrusive. So I think I'll probably start doing it. What I've been doing is only when I get an actual email from a reader, only then do I add them to this, very modest little Gmail contact list. It's people who reached out to me, and it might be 150 people now. And I send very occasional, very brief emails. So, for example, when Greg LeMond, the subject of my last book, won a Congressional Gold Medal, which is Congress's highest honor, I sent a short blast out saying that. And I will say, I think the people on this list, I think they trust me that I'm not gonna, well, see, if you're a fiction writer, your newsletters look great, and I bet they're extremely readable, and I would probably love to see one of those, but I don't know, I feel sheepish about it. So I write very short things, and I'm hoping that these 150 people understand that I'm not going to do this often, and it's going to be good stuff, and it's short, and I'm hoping that they're all actually, most of them are actually reading it. But I've obviously got to take this to a more professional level. So when I do my new website, I'll do what most successful writers do, which is to ask people, do you want to give your email address? And I don't know what I would put it, God, in a newsletter, but I could just keep setting out my little blasts and just do them in this more sort of formalized professional way. And that's probably what I will do.
Fauzia.
I feel like I come out at the end and go, no, you must do all of it. You have to do it. Okay, so I think a newsletter is really important. Having your mailing list is really important. In fact, in my many years of doing this work of digital marketing for authors, one thing is clear, is that the mailing list is really the area that is the most effective piece. In fact, I think everything you do is really in service of that mailing list. It doesn't have to be huge. Don't think, I know people who are like, oh, there's only a few hundred people on it, so I don't really have to pay attention to it. Those 400 or 500 people, maybe the 200 people, maybe 1,000 people are literally the start of your word of mouth campaign. Word of mouth is still the most effective way to sell books. 100%, doesn't matter what the format is. When your friend sends you a text and says, I just read a book I think you'd love, you're buying that book, right? So word of mouth is still the most important thing. How are people going to learn about your work? So in my advice is that for the newsletter, again, you become the curator of all of the information that you are doing. And yes, you shouldn't do it a lot, but depends on your audience. Seth Godin has millions of people on his newsletter. He's been doing it for, I think, 20 years. And he sends it out every single day. Every single day. And people don't unsubscribe. There are people who do it monthly. There are people who do it weekly. There are people who can do it once every 3 months, which is kind of the cadence that I like. And in that period, then it's your job to sort of say, here are the blog posts that I've written. I just got a good review. Here's a book I just read. There's a way to connect with, and again, one of the things that's amazing is that a lot of newsletters, programs, right? MailChimp, Constant Contact, all of those programs are brilliant. They will actually show you how many people are opening your newsletter, what are they clicking on. So each month that you send it or each newsletter gets better. You can get better. You can see what people are liking. You can see what they're clicking on. So if everybody's clicking on the link to the New Yorker cartoon, then that's great. You add that more. So it just depends on your audience, but I think the newsletter is really important because, for the longest time in book publishing, the idea of marketing was the authors sort of disappear. They go in, they do their writing, they're not in touch with anybody. They show up, we do all sorts of marketing for them for a few weeks, all comes down, they go back to writing, we all go back to our own lives. So there was this cycle of going up, down, up, down, up, down. Now the idea is that when you're marketing a book, especially if this is your long-term career, I have to tell you, I wrote one book. I'm exhausted. I don't know how people write more than one book. It's crazy. I applaud all of you for being able to do it. I thought it was just way too much work. But if you're planning to write more books and you're thinking that, you do your marketing, it's over here, you launch your book, you plateau at this point, you start your newsletter, you kind of keep that relationship going with those readers. The next book, you're starting at a higher level. You haven't gone back to zero again. So the newsletter actually connects one book to the other. You don't have to be a sales pitch all the time. You can talk about things that interest you. Lots of people talked about baking bread during COVID. Who knew? I can't bake bread, so I think it's phenomenal that people were doing that. But that was interesting to people. Some people garden, some people do other things. I think the more holistic you can make it or be helpful, that's helpful to people, and they stay with you. So the next project you have, now you guys could have another book. Your book could get optioned by Netflix. You could have a play. You might have other things that you're going to do. And the newsletter community, right? That's literally the only community that you actually have, because Facebook can take your page down anytime. Any of the social network, you cannot, they can kick you off. You don't own that audience. They can kick you off. So the only audience that you really have is your mailing list. So I would just say, focus on that. I can obviously answer any questions at the end if you need them, but I think it's a really important aspect to keep that relationship with your audience, regardless of your publication schedule.
Mhm.
Well, let's shift now to publicity through formal media, not media that you control yourself. This can be TV programs, podcasts, radio, press interviews of any sort, book sites. There's a proliferation of book sites out there. Starting with Dan, how involved do you get in trying to line up that publicity with your books?
Yeah, each of my books is really, really different from all of the others. I've done an amnesia memoir, a Hollywood story, a professional cycling article, book, and now a B.B. King biography. So very, very different. So what I've done is I have done these kind of regional shoestring book tours where I pick a region where I think the book's going to sell. I pick some cities in that region. I find venues. So for Andy and Don, libraries in places like Richmond, Raleigh, Charlotte, bookstores, one or the other, historical societies. There are some ones that do huge 200, 300 person luncheons. And then I start with maybe one or two anchor events at pretty big places. Let's say maybe the Regulator bookstore in Durham, and then maybe Fountain in Richmond, and a couple others, and then fill in your calendar, make it a week, find some other places to host you. They're not paying you, so they don't really care. And with Andy and Don, the people, they came, they showed up. Thank goodness. I didn't realize how hard that can be, but people came to my book talks down there. And then once the events are scheduled, 7 events over 10 days in North Carolina, then I contact the media. I call the newspapers in all of those cities, and 90% of the time I get some kind of coverage. 90% of the time I get an article written about my book and about me, because I'm showing up, because I'm showing up in town to talk about Andy Griffith and Don Knotts. With Andy Griffith and Don Knotts, I got not just newspapers, I got TV coverage, Virginia This Morning, radio, a bunch of stuff. I mean, it worked out great. And now I can tell if I look on Amazon and that thing where you see sales by city. I mean, I sold a bunch of books in North Carolina, a bunch of books. And you don't need to sell books all over the country. If you can sell a whole bunch of books in Raleigh and Charlotte, and Richmond, that's enough. That's enough. I think the hardcover went into eight or 9 printings. with the Comeback, which is a less well-known brand, right? You don't all know who Greg LeMond is. You should, but you don't. I mean, we all should. I'm not shaming you in any way. It's just he isn't all that well known. But what I did in that case was I found, again, I picked a region where I knew cycling was huge, Northern California, Oregon, Washington. Why not? You know, it's beautiful out there. And in this case, because I was very concerned about bringing people in, I didn't want a bunch of empty rooms. So I found a whole bunch of cycling clubs and bicycle shops and called them, and they knew exactly what I was doing, and they loved Greg and they loved the book. And I brought like a whole bunch of people into, you know, a venue in like Berkeley and a venue in Sonoma and all over that area of the country by partnering cycling clubs and or bicycle shops with bookstores. And once the bookstore understood that I was working with a cycling club, and they said, well, we bring 40, 50 people to our meeting, so we'll just have the meeting here. And the bookstore came, and you know, it worked out great. But that would not have worked if I hadn't partnered with these niche groups, right? The cycling clubs, the bicycle shops. If I'd just gone to a bunch of bookstores, I don't think I would have had 10 people in any of those events.
So for BB King, you're going to be in a lot of blues clubs?
You know, that one's still coming together. Right now, we're in a weird place. I just got an email from the owner of a bookshop down south. People are getting very tired of Zoom, and bookstores are tiring of holding events on Zoom. So some of them are just not booking anything until they're sure they can book things in person. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do. What I want to do is exactly what I did with the last two books, which is I want to go to Mississippi, I want to go to Louisiana, I want to go to Tennessee. And I want to, BB is huge, so I don't think I necessarily need partner organizations to come in. I think the bookstores can bring in people. And again, with LeMond, with the cycling book, I got coverage. I got newspaper articles written about me in a whole bunch of different places. You'd never guess, but you know, coming to town, and if you can convince them that this guy is an icon to a whole bunch of people in this region of the country. In some cases, I wrote articles, kind of op-ed type articles for the publications. That's what I did with like the Portland Oregonian, also with the San Jose Mercury News. But I have a huge list of press hits I got for Greg LeMond. You know, it was amazing. So yeah, I'll do something like that if I can this time around.
So Andrea.
That's awesome. It's a little harder, you know, the fiction world is a little more tougher to distinguish yourself. There are a lot of authors in a lot of genres looking to do events. So I do bookstores and libraries locally. You know, it's expensive to travel. So unless you know, and the publishers are not, you know, my traditional publisher is not exactly putting on grand tours. So I have to be, you know, I do partner with, if I have an author friend who has a book coming out around the same time, we sometimes will offer ourselves as a pair to do it, you know, interview each other. Zoom has actually been good for this because we can reach out to different regions. But I think it's, at least for me, and maybe I'm just an introvert, it's harder to do I find it harder to do the in-person, put together a robust a schedule for that without breaking the bank, or it just, I find it hard. So I do what I can, but it's not nearly as impressive as Dan's list.
Fauzia.
Yeah, Dan, super job. If you ever need a job as a publicist, please let me know. I can.
Right.
You may have a second career on your hands. So well done. But I think he probably outlined the ideal, perfect way to really do a tour, and that was awesome. And I think obviously so I don't know if we're going to split the media in traditional and online. Are we, David?
Go ahead.
It's all one thing.
Yeah,
so
we're just talking now.
Publicity in general. So when you think about publicity, there are different elements to it. Dan obviously talked about the book tour as such. And one of the things that happens when you're actually physically in a place is that the local media is easier to get. So it's harder to get local media if you're not actually in their city. So that's why it was easier for him to do that. You can't really get coverage in Mississippi if you're in, New York or San Diego or something like
true,
that. You
so
actually
true.
have to be there. Yeah. So that's why that's why publishers used to tour authors. It wasn't really for the sales in bookstores, which have never been good. It was always because if you send the author to the city for a book event, there is other media, local NPR, the local newspaper, the local TV maybe might take you on. And if the book is a really great fit for that particular region, then it was worth the investment to send the author, even if you don't sell the books in the bookstores. So that's one element of it. Not everybody tours. I think Andrea is absolutely right. Touring is expensive. Most publishers don't really have the budget to tour. And now I'm hearing more and more that publishers are sort of going, Zoom is great. Yeah, we're not sending anybody anywhere.
Right.
Let's just have the
Yeah.
author sit at home, let's save some money. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what touring looks like. It was already shrinking, but I think going forward, it's going to be even more. I think one of the interesting things is not only is the touring shrinking from the publisher's perspective, now they've put the ownership of the events on the authors. So it's not only are we not touring you, but good luck setting up all of your events, because you can do them on Zoom now. So it's going to be an interesting place for all of us to kind of find ourselves, and we'll see how it is.
Let me raise one thing that
Yes,
I've been
of
promoting
course,
a book
David.
for the last 3 months. And
Yeah.
one of the things I keep hearing from my publisher is, geez, those Zoom things are great. You got, hundreds, a couple of times, thousands of hits. That's wonderful. It's not selling books because at an in-person event, the kind Dan was doing and I have done in other times,
They want autographs.
people feel shame if they don't buy the book. They look cheap in front of their friends.
You position yourself in front of the door.
And they want the signature.
That's
And
what
they
you
want
do.
a sale. Yeah.
Don't let them leave.
But on Zoom, they just hit leave meeting and, sayonara.
Yeah.
Well, that is absolutely true. And guilt being what it is, bookstore events still did not sell a lot of books. So if you got 40 people, you sold 10 copies. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
That's the guilt spectrum you got. You not 40. If 40 people came to your event, 40 people did not buy the book. That's true. We've been keeping track of how many books are sold at each event, and it's generally a smaller percentage than obviously the ones that showed up. So that's true even in physical bookstores, but on Zoom, it's obviously much easier. People don't do that. And you're right, the events are not leading to book sales as such. The other issue is that if you have one event in a bookstore, do you really need to have another one? Because you're going to say the same things and people can watch that recording. It's on YouTube. It's a whole new thing. I think we're going to have to figure out how all of that works. But that's still just one part of publicity. Publicity obviously also means being on TV, radio, print reviews. And then, of course, my favorite, which is my company's focus, is the digital side, which is book bloggers and podcasters and Instagram book reviewers, which are called bookstagrammers. And now on TikTok, there's a whole group of people called Book Talk people, and they're reviewing books. So there's actually an expansion going on online while the traditional media book coverage is shrinking. So there's a lot of options for authors in terms of exposure. It just depends on what your book is, what your goals are. Whenever publicity comes up, I always ask authors what success looks like to them. What's publicity success? For some, it's being on TV. They want to be on the Today Show. They want to be on, one of the TV shows. And then for some, it's print reviews. It's print reviews or bust for them, right? If they can't get a review in the newspaper, nothing else matters. You can get, a blogger that has 200,000 people following them on Twitter, and which for digital media is a big hit. it means nothing to them because success always meant having a review in the New York Times or LA Times or Boston Globe or something like that. So it's really important to make sure that when you're thinking about publicity, you align yourself with your own goals and be very clear about that. And if you're going to be working with a freelancer, to make sure that they can achieve those goals. So if someone comes to me and says, hey, I want to be on TV, that's not my client. That's not something I do. So that's there's a lot of things in publicity, and it's very, very important. Of course, I would say that I'm biased, but I still think publicity is super important for authors to do, because that's the piece that lends credibility, that gets you out in the world, that shows up on Google searches, all of those kinds of things. So I would say it's important, but not everybody can do a tour like Dan. So for those authors, especially for fiction authors, online has been an amazing place to be, very supportive and helpful and encouraging. And podcasts actually sell books. So there's a lot of avenues in publicity.
Let me go to some of the questions that have been submitted and start off with some very specific ones. Last night I tried to present, Tuesday night I tried to present this as the lightning round so we could just sort of get answers. But one question is, how does an author find specific Facebook groups? You want to find the Facebook group that cares deeply about Regency era England. How do you find that?
Oh, you can, I mean, it is easy to search that. I mean, just the keyword Regency or Regency romance, Regency fiction. I think it's fairly easy to find those groups, and you'll hit one, and then there'll be links to other ones there, or people will be talking about them. I think if you're willing to do a little bit of searching, and you can find groups, and there's a big one on Facebook just called the Beau Monde, because that's what society was called. So there you sort of can go down the rabbit hole fairly easily, I think.
Well, okay, I'm very interested in this question because I don't know what it's talking about. Could you say a few words about services like BookFunnel? I've never heard of BookFunnel.
That's to give away a free book. Let's say you want to give a prize that you say, I'm going to choose a random winner for people, my Instagram followers. And rather than you have to contact them, what ebook format do you use, whatever, you can, I think there's a basic free account, and you can put a book there and you just send somebody a link. And when they go there, they can download a free book, the free book that you've put there. And it is effective. I mean, I know a lot of people who use it. If you want to generate interest, or if a reviewer calls you and says, can you give me a book, and you're not on NetGalley or, one of the big publisher sites, you can do it yourself in a sense. You could even put something on Facebook, I'll give the first 10 book bloggers a free book and you just direct them to BookFunnel to do it. And it is a good tool. I mean, I know a lot of people use it.
Does Goodreads matter?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
My first the Amnesia memoir, Simon & Schuster did a number of giveaways on Goodreads, and so the result of that is that I've got a pretty large number of Goodread ratings for that book. And the same thing with Andy and Don. They did, I think, one giveaway, and it immediately boosted and see, then if you have a whole bunch of ratings on Goodreads, that's good, because I think you're more likely to be added to their lists of things if there are more ratings.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping with the B.B. King biography that they'll do a giveaway. I think you have to pay for it now. So I'm hoping they'll do that.
Yeah.
You do have to pay for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the publishers pay for it. I think it's important to have a presence there. And if you can do a giveaway, it does help. people then they start doing less lists, most anticipated in whatever in your genre. And if someone then adds your book to the list, readers, it's a very active site of readers, and they care a lot about books. So I think people pay attention to, you can build a buzz there, I think.
So here's a question. Now, I don't mean to suggest that any of us would do this, but does it help if you ask your friends to post reviews, presumably 5-star reviews?
Mm-hmm.
Is that good? I have to say, the one thing I saw a little while ago that I thought was wonderful is Amazon bounced a guy's review that had been written by his mother. And the guy said, but she loves my writing.
Oh, I'm sure it was sincere.
Right.
She meant it. In any event, what about organizing review parties?
I'm really against that. I philosophically, I just don't like that, but whatever. I just have never, I hope someone will like my book. I hope they'll review it, but I don't. I know it's a difficult thing especially if you're your first book and you're trying to get it noticed, and you want reviews. I don't know. I think you just have to decide if you feel comfortable with that. I don't.
David, I very frequently tell people who reach out to me, I'd be grateful if you would review or rate my book on Goodreads or Amazon. Not every time, but most of the time, and a lot of the time they do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They've already written me an email saying they like the book,
Yeah, that's different. But I don't. If someone's talking to you about your book, or comments, that they've read it and they like it, you can say, hey, well, great. If you feel you could put something on. But I don't. I thought your question was you go and sort of solicit, get a bunch of people to write it. It's tricky. Obviously, we all want as many reviews up. The algorithms, if you reach certain levels, are good, but it's.
Yeah, I think there are services you can pay, and I think it's a bad idea because you can get caught.
Yeah.
But Fauzia, do you have a?
I do. It's really tricky because, most people, most authors, it's the most cringeworthy thing for them to ask people to buy their book and write a review, right? It's like you just want to hide. I didn't do it. I wish I had. I did not understand the importance of it, but it is really important. And what I have learned over time, since my book, because I did not do it for my book, is that the people in your life are more than happy to support you, because at some point, in some way, you have supported them. You have a favor bank. But what I was surprised to me was that people don't put 2 and 2 together. I thought when my book came out, as a marketer still already, thinking that if people know me and they know I have a book, they'll obviously buy it, right? That just seemed like the most normal thing to me, but that is not what happens. And now I coach and see my clients putting together a very nice email saying, can you do me a favor? And would you mind buying my book, because it's important to build buzz. My publisher is going to be paying more attention people will do it. And, it helps because if you do it, especially if you do it in pre-orders, which I work with authors to get, majority of the pre-orders are going to come from people There is no complete strangers out there who are sitting around waiting for your book so they can pre-order it 3 months in advance. Not really happening. We're not Stephen King. Right. So they are really going to be your people on your mailing list. They're the people who are in your inner circle. Those are the people who are going to pre-order your book. Pre-ordering your book has a lot of benefits. It's beneficial because your publisher takes you seriously. It's beneficial because Amazon will take you seriously. I've seen Amazon double their order from a publisher when they started seeing pre-orders come in. So it's cringeworthy. I get you, I hear it's awful to do, but I believe me, asking people to pre-order and order your book and then asking them if they liked it to review it is a really kind of a
Okay.
important thing. Not easy. As I said, I didn't do it myself because I felt it was such a cringeworthy thing, but it does really work. So if you can muster up the courage, and I've got a little template I work with my authors where the email doesn't sound quite as awful as it makes you feel, it tends to work. So that's my 2 cents.
Here's a question that I think it's a wonderful question, but it has many thousands of answers. What will your publisher do to promote your book? And I think the only reliable answer is less than they used to.
Right.
What's your experience?
I think that covers it.
Yeah.
Depends on the publisher, depends on your book, depends on your sales of your last book, depends on a million factors. I think it would be an hour session just to answer that, unless Andrea and Dan have a super answer for that.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the reasons I'm with the same publisher now for it'll be a 3rd book, I hope, I pray, is that they like what I do for myself. They do things for me, but they really appreciate the stuff that I do, if that's any help.
Yes. Yeah. As I said, you're a great publicist. Who would want you?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. You know, I've found my publisher will do sort of the same 6 or 8 things, you know, for each book. And they are very happy when you can think outside the box and set up some things on your own. And I just keep my fingers crossed that between the 2 things, you know, word does get out. One thing we haven't mentioned at all, and I think it is sort of important, is librarians are important. You know, you should always contact your local librarian if you have written a book and drop it off. And they recommend a lot of books, especially if you have a town or a local library that is active and people come in. It's like in a bookstore, if you make relationships, they will recommend your book, and you'd be amazed. You can build some, you know, offer to do a talk for your local library. And they talk with each other, you know, different towns, they go to conferences, they can help build buzz on a book. And in fact, one of the really interesting promos that I recently did was my publisher had 6 of us in different genres appear at one of the National Library, the Overdrive, I think, buying panel, what they're going to put on the digital library platforms. So we did a presentation they did it for a number of their titles, but they had a few of us authors talk about our books. And so libraries are really, especially because so many of them have Libby, you know, the digital platform. I mean, libraries buy a lot of books. I mean, even though you're thinking, well, people are just taking them out of the library and reading them, but you can get fans, you know, people who like your book so much they want to have a set in their house or something, or they recommend it to their friend, or it's libraries really are a good way to build awareness of you and your books.
So how much time, we're getting to a couple of hard-nosed questions. How much time do you spend on marketing in a week?
Full time.
Well, yeah.
Doesn't it depend what stage you're in and writing? I mean, for me, like right now, it's most of the time because I have a book coming out in October.
Yeah.
But a year ago, it was very little time.
So it depends on the cycle of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I get up every morning with my coffee and I spend probably, you know, an hour between 7 and 8 visiting my different sites, making the daily comments I feel I have to make, check other things that I need to think about getting done. When is the newsletter going to go out? So I try not to let it suck away my writing time. You have to be really disciplined, I think, but I try and set aside that time in the morning when I sit and have coffee and get that stuff cleared on the decks, and then I'm ready to write for the day.
And I would say there should never be a time when you're not paying attention to it at all, because if you stop paying attention to your readers, they're not going to show up for you when you're ready for them.
Yeah.
So you do need to keep a consistent, you've got to be consistently visible, and don't just show up when you have something to sell. That doesn't feel good. So you definitely want to make sure, yes, you can definitely scale back and scale up, but don't disappear, because that's not really feasible. You spend all this time building energy and platform and attention, and then if you disappear, that all goes away. So it's so much, it really is so important to keep those people with you. And that's why the newsletter is important, because then at least they're staying with you through that channel.
Mm-hmm. Oh, can I add, throw out something, David, before you go to the next question, that I realized too? What readers love is to hear what books you've been reading that you love. So recommending, one of the favorite regular features we do on our blog, on my group blog, is every month we do what we are reading. And we talk about the books we've loved that month. And we then ask readers what they've been reading and they love. And it is so popular, and they talk among each other. And so readers love to hear about that. And I think Fauzia mentioned that you put that in your newsletter too. Recommending, then you become like a buddy to someone too. I've noticed when I Zoom with my friends, we always talk about what books we're reading too. It's just, so that's really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I would agree with that. Actually, I've had that experience where people will relate to that better than anything else.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
And you're supporting another author.
It's building
goodwill.
But you're making friends with readers as a reader, and that it just really strengthens a bond, I think.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, another hard-nosed question. This person wants to do the arithmetic on why would you do a live event, because you're selling, let's say, 10 books. And you, as the author, are going to walk away with a cool $2 per book, assuming you've actually got a contract with a traditional publisher. So was that $20 worth it if the time you spent traveling there and then coming back and being there? So it works out, I don't know, $3-4 an hour. Isn't there something else you could do?
That's true for all publishing endeavors. For all of us, there's definitely other ways that we could make more money. I'm sure of it.
Right.
I think I'll let Dan answer that question, but I do want to say that the reason to do a live event in itself, the event itself, is not as important as the media around it. So you get media, and that media generates more media. So obviously that's important. And also, just because the people didn't buy the book at that bookstore at that moment doesn't mean they don't have family members who would love that book and they'll buy it next time they're around. So, but I'll let Dan answer that, because he does this obviously well.
Well, I've done some events like the Hudson Historical Society in Ohio, where there were hundreds of people there, and that moved some books. But usually I'm not doing the event for the event. I'm doing the event for the media. Exactly. I'm just thinking, I spoke up in Frederick a few years ago, Frederick, Maryland, and I called one of the AM radio stations there, and just hustled my way onto the radio for 5 minutes to talk about the book talk on a very popular talk radio station in Frederick. I got a big thing in the Frederick News Post. I don't know how, but I got it. They don't have a huge flood of book speakers in Frederick like they do in DC, right? And I don't know, 10 people showed up at the book talk, but I bet I sold dozens of books through the Frederick News Post and through that AM radio thing. And that's always what I'm thinking about. If I don't get any media for the book talk, I consider it a failure.
Yes, that is the way you want to think about an event for sure.
So here's a question about asserting that Facebook and other social media dealing with niche groups on Facebook and other social media, that often they specify no solicitation. I ran into that with my college alumni association, something Andrea would be familiar with, which specifies that. And this person wants to get close to the line. I could have represented them when I was a lawyer. Aside from interacting with the subject matter, what kinds of things can you do to mention your work without seeming obnoxious or getting kicked out of the group?
I think if you're new to the group, just read through the posts. I mean, people do. One thing you can do is, I know on the groups are interested in history or Regency history, so you can always put a link saying, I've got a blog up on fashion or something that is on your website. And so people go to your website, they'll see the books. There are ways you can direct readers in a tasteful way where you're actually sharing information they're interested in, but make sure you send them to a place that has your book. Like, I mean, again, send them to your website, which
is why websites are so important.
Right, that's why. Yeah.
So I would say in a group, one of the other things that you can do is you definitely can't go in there guns blazing, like, here's my book, I showed up, none of that will work. People will definitely throw you out, and it'll leave a bad taste in people's mouths. So don't do that. But one of the things you can do is start doing this research early. So you're not at a crunch point where you're like, I need to tell everyone about my book this week. Start 4 months before, 6 months before. In fact, if it's whether it's fiction or nonfiction, start using those groups as part of the research. Ask people. I had one client who was working on a book, on World War II book, and it was in the North Africa campaign, which doesn't get as much attention as obviously the European campaign. And he was looking for some information, and he posted in a group that he was looking for some information. People got so excited about the book because that's not a topic most people write about. And it was much more interesting to them to have that sort of back and forth. They were offering something, he was responding. So start early enough that you can you can really integrate yourself into that group. The other thing you can do is get on the group and start noticing who's really active. And then as a side, ask that person if they would be interested in seeing your book. So not posting it on your group, but maybe taking one of the people who are in the group and asking them if they would review the book or mention it, or don't even say why. Just say, I think you might enjoy my book. May I send you a free copy? See what happens. But Dan, you want to answer that? Because you obviously did that well.
Giving a book away, that won't get you kicked off the group. I've done that. And then sometimes if you belong to one of these groups, somebody will once every 6 months, somebody will post onto the Mayberry After Midnight group, hey, I just read this book by Daniel de Vise. And then I'll pop up and say, hey man, that's great. Thank you so much. And then a conversation gets started. And that's them. I'm not soliciting my own, right? They're saying they like the book. I put up stuff, a funny picture of Don Knotts or whatever, and somebody will say, hey Dan, I loved your book. And then I say, hey, thank you. I'm so glad you loved it. Again, there's all sorts of 100 different ways you can interact. And I love these groups, and they can tell I enjoy interacting with the other members, and they consider me sort of a VIP member or something, but inevitably somebody will mention my book and say, I recommend it, or once in a long time, oh, that book was really harsh, but usually it helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dan said the magic word. He enjoys being in those groups.
I love them.
You don't have to be anywhere else as long as you enjoy where you are. So joy, people.
Well, let's just talk for a second about the event, either live in person or on Zoom. Do you want to just talk about how you wrote the book, why you wrote the book? Do you want to do an in conversation with somebody who questions you and, sort of vary it a little bit? Do you actually read, which I think is something that fiction writers are more expected to do than nonfiction, thank God. The only times I've read, it's horrible because I always find things I wish I had written differently. What formats do you find are congenial and seem to work?
I usually, by the way, David Stewart's one of the most naturally gifted writers I've ever met. I don't know what he would ever see that he wrote that he didn't like, but anyway.
Pretty much every sentence.
hardest is his own toughest critic.
Yeah,
It's hard.
I have
hard.
it's usually a 40-minute talk, right? And I have a thing, I do the same talk every time. I work it up. I don't use notes. I don't use anything. It's like doing a stand-up routine. You just sort of remember what you're going to do. You hit your points. I usually do something about why I did the book in the first place, the story of how the book came to be, and then just a very quick, I hope exciting synopsis of the book that leads you over the narrative arc, and then into questions. It really helps, I think, to connect with the people you're talking to. Like when I was talking to the cycling people, I would always say, you guys look amazing. I mean, you guys are going to live to be 100, all of you. And it kind of helps to find a way. I learned this from a politician in my family, just like really praise the people you're talking to. Don't be afraid to show emotion about the person you wrote about, because I love these people I've written about. I absolutely adore and worship them. I think they're amazing human beings, and just kind of show some of that passion when you're speaking. But it's basically the same talk that's about 40 minutes. I never read from the book. I just talk about it and about me and about why I did it, basically.
I enjoy talking about character, how you craft. I think the craft of writing is fun. I can do I have a talk that I'm comfortable doing, as Dan said, without notes, without, why I love the era, why I find it a fascinating era, what I write in, and what inspires me in characters. And I also enjoy doing a couple, I've done a number of in conversation with another writer. And again, we talk about craft with each other and strong heroines and how you write. And I think audiences enjoy hearing the process of writing. I think it interests them. So I think that's good. I think reading is deadly. I refuse to do it. I really think people don't want to. People are snoring after 5 minutes. You just don't. They come because they want to hear you talk about, I think, other things. Than we can't read our books halfway as well as the audio narrator, a professional narrator. I just think it's deadly.
So I want to answer this question, David. I know we've got to move on, but I think, when last year, when COVID happened and all of us just got thrown onto Zoom, everybody sort of did what they could, right? We were all trying to figure our way out of it. But I think as we move forward, I have started to see authors become much more creative in the events that they put on. I think it's going to be a really awesome new facet of marketing, because giving people the option to see you from all over the world is remarkable. I agree with Dan. People have Zoom fatigue. I have Zoom fatigue. You do too. And by the way, for those of you who kept your video on, thank you so much. It's been great to see you. You all look fabulous. Dan said to compliment everyone. And I loved seeing you, because otherwise it feels like you're in a dark void just talking into your computer. It makes you mad. So I appreciate the smiling faces and the nods and all of those things. So thank you, those of you who are on your camera. I see you all. But as far as events are concerned, I think there are some really creative things that people can do. So they can do music, right? You can include music. Now, Dan talking for 45 minutes, great. It works for him, especially when he's in front of a very passionate audience and they want to hear about that particular person. But for new readers, you have to really kind of pull them into an event. And I have seen authors, one of my clients did an amazing job. She had written a book on pageants, the Miss America pageant. And what she did was actually, because her mother was a contestant, actually a winner, she knew that circuit. So she got the person who does the announcements, you know, when you watch the show and someone says, here comes Miss whatever.
Yeah.
So she got him to introduce her, which was so fun. We all laughed. She also asked everyone to put on a tiara for the event, and everybody put on their tiara and got a chance to talk about it. She had some music. I had another client of mine who did a wonderful event where she read some poetry, and then she had a friend of hers who was joining from Ireland, and he's a great musician in Ireland, and he was playing music from Ireland. It just, I think there's a way to make these things more interactive. And I would say to all of the authors who are now, we are in virtual event mode. I mean, yes, we're going to have some in-person events, but virtual events are not going anywhere. That people who have been doing them are not giving them up. You know, they love them. So many people are like, I love sitting in my bedroom and enjoying a good talk. Authors love it. So I would say almost think of your event in segments, right? I mean, when people put on a show on TV, they talk about segments. So you can think about what are the first 5 minutes like, or what is the next 10 minutes like? When do you give, you know, is there a pause? Because, you know, we get Zoom fatigue. So build all that in. Recently, I was in a planning committee for an online conference. And we really did think about the experience of being there, and we gave people breaks, and we gave people chance to network with each other. And so think outside the box. Sorry, I know it's such a cliche to say, but like enjoy putting on a show, really. Think about what you could do that would be interesting. I do agree with Andrea, reading straight up for all that time on Zoom is probably pretty deadly. So, but people are having fun. They're creating some really cool events. I'm enjoying it. I think about it that way for sure.
I just to pile on, that I had the most fun I ever had doing an event was when I had acquired through a charity auction the services of a James Madison impersonator, and I had just done a book on Madison, and so he came to the event, and he totally upstaged me. He, you know, talked for at least 30 minutes out of 40, and it was great because he was very good. The audience loved it, and you know, it was good.
Yeah.
I want to thank this wonderful panel, and for you folks who have stuck around. I've been learning things, and I've taken a few notes myself for things I should be trying to do and do better. We really hope that you've been able to pick up some pointers for yourself from all four of the programs we've done. There will be links to all four, so you can watch them again if you're really masochistic, or you can, if you missed one, you can catch up on one you missed. Just a reminder, I did say before, the logistical details about the May 14 and May 15 agent pitch sessions, those will be coming. They'll come out next week. You should receive them. And also, we will be sending around a survey looking for your reaction to things we've done. And we would very much appreciate it if you'd tell us candidly, not just 5-star reviews. Tell us the truth. So when we all get together in real time next spring for the 2022 conference, it'll be even better. So thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the librarians.
Thank you, everyone.
And thanks for being here. It was really lovely to meet you all. Thank you.
It really was. Thank you, everyone.